conversation on the intersection of art, craft and design. I have several questions for the panelists, and then we will be taking questions from the audience. I do have to say I feel quite a great privilege to be joined by four powerhouse women. A warm welcome to Gab Scott, Grace Lamb, Jude Van Der Merwe and Pakenham I would like to start with a couple of introductions. I'll try to keep them short, but it's hard to keep them short considering how much wealth of knowledge those ladies have. First off, Gab Scott. Gab is a designer and artist with 20 years of experience. She currently holds roles as an art consultant and interior designer at sister companies Art Theory and Design Theory, and is a committee member at Design Fremantle. Her career has spanned production design for MTV, furniture design, gallery directorship, and a practice as an exhibiting artist. Clap. Grace Lamb. For a decade, she was the senior fashion editor at Vogue China. She collaborated with international talents like Hugh Grant, Naomi Campbell, and Mario Testino, to name a few, and her work has appeared across the world, including Vogue Italia, Japan, and Australia, as well as Harper Bazaar Australia, Tatler, Numero, and Ad. She's a board member at the Revelation Film Festival Perth. She's an avid fan of Formula One racing, and a passionate advocate for promoting discussions on the topics of menopause. Clap again. Need a little clap sign. Jude. Jude has over 30 years of experience in the cultural and visual arts sector. She's a founding partner and co-curator of the Indian Ocean Craft Triennial, senior vice president of the World's Crafts Council Asia Pacific region, past chair and current board member of the World's Craft Council Australia, and a member of the advisory board Curtin School of Design and Built Environment. Last but not least, Kartika Ali Ahmad. She's an emerging industrial lighting designer who blurs the boundaries between commercial design and expanded sculptural forms. Ahmad uses exacting engineering and finishes to imbue nostalgia and romance into her pieces, which offer an aesthetic investigation into our present and future. Her exhibition Brutalist last year received attention internationally, and her second exhibition Sign is currently on at Colwood Space. You should all go and have a look. Right, well, the last but not least actually is I do want to say a very big thank you to HC Digital and Digital Creators for this video broadcast. HC Digital is a Perth-based media agency that provides exceptional photography, videography, and streaming services, as well as content creation for events, businesses, and brands. That's him sitting right there. You should also clap. Thank you. Well, welcome and thank you. I'll kick off with Gab. There you go. We're ready? Okay. You're an artist and a designer. What has been your journey in exploring the two?
Firstly, thank you for beautiful introductions. And if we're talking about powerhouses, I'm putting this back on Julia for a second. She's put this show together through sheer will and determination and grace, the way she always works. Also part of my gang at Design Fremantle, so I know the kind of woman she is, and she's a weapon. So that's an important sorry, I know that that's your worst nightmare. But hey, it has to be done. And these esteemed, women in front of me, what a pleasure. So yes, look, artist and designer. I'm a designer who makes some art. The term artist seems much too generous for me, but yes, I'm an interior designer. I have an art practice that comes really out of the love of using my hands, and I'm a committee member at Design Fremantle, which for those that don't know is a not-for-profit group of really passionate Fremantle-based, but not exclusively, designers across a range of fields, and we're just really, it's really in sync with what we're talking about today. We really care about bridging the gap between the public and the design industry, how to remove some of the esoteric nature that comes from design, and make things really tangible and understandable and meaningful in a daily sense. So that's a little Design Freo blurb. Look, my background started in film, I shifted to interiors. The art side of my business, the design is predominantly commercial work, so hospitality and workplace probably take up most of my time. And the art practice came about almost accidentally. Art and design and the interplay between them is interesting to me, and it can only be explained in my brain as art asking the questions, or asking questions in general, and design answering questions. So we'll talk a little bit more about this idea of function, but design is one thing to me, and it's often, there's an anticipation with design. We anticipate when we're designing something, there's some designers in the crowd that I know that will understand this. There's an anticipation of where your work will end up. There's an anticipation of its use, of how it sits, of what it is and what it means and how it's used. And art and craft are liberated from that idea a little bit. There's a subconscious, there's an asking, there's an internal pondering, and then this gracious kind of expression. And while design still is full of expression and values driven, there's a real duality there. And so many designers, which is why I ended up with an art practice of sorts. You'll hear us say, particularly with interiors or architects, we get into that line of work because we love making. We care about things, how things go together. We care about composition. We care about the tactility of things, materials, what they feel like. We're the annoying people that when we walk into a shop, we all do this, touch everything, right? Everything. I'll touch every piece of stone or timber I can get my hands on. Now that comes because we love what art and craft are. And in a way, making for art and craft, making is remembering. I like to think about this idea of like, you use your hands, there's a cultural remembering. And we get into design because that means something to us. But we often sit at the computer for way too long, right? So many designers will have a love project, will have an art project, will have an extension of their work, because we are desperate to get back to this idea of what our hands feel like moving and touching things. So my art practice came about because a girlfriend who's a real artist, a painter, said, I see this show, I'm going to have this show, but in the room there's got to be objects. Will you make objects? Now spatial design is comfortable for me, 3D is comfortable for me, and I've always thought maybe there is going to be this 3D art expression, but I wasn't sure what that was going to be. So it was that opportunity that threw me into an art practice that sits alongside my design practice. I also work in 2D large formats, collage works. Again, 2D doesn't come naturally, so that art practice is cut and paste because I had to be touching things. And any painter will say, well, we use our hands. There's something for me in the mechanical nature of cutting and gluing something that had to be the base of 2D works for me.
I mean, you have been cutting and gluing since your childhood. You were telling me about you being in your bedroom and having to plaster your entire wall in cuttings, and that was your form of expression. Like, that was the first touch point that you had with art form when you were a kid, and then slowly you got into interior design, and that's kind of how you got into that. But yes, touching and doing tactile work and crafting was your first touch point, right?
Yeah, hands are important to me. It's why I gesticulate so much when I talk. It's just that, it's that thing. But yes, I was the dorky kid, and you hear it all the time. He's like, oh, and I was doing all these things with my house and my room, and I was always collecting junk from the salvage yard and making cool furniture that sat next to my bed. Like, I care about the composition, you know, and there's the putting together of things is makes me really tick. And so I guess now I work in art consultancy, predominantly in public art. I now get this really nice opportunity to combine a love of construction, the courage of working with artists who laterally span lots of materials and scales and scopes, built form, art, and lateral thinking, things I care about.
You just took it to the completely next level since you were a childhood all the way where you are now. Just cutting and pasting on a very professional scale, that's basically where you're at. But I'll get to Grace actually now because I feel like it's a really good connection of, you know, where we're at. But so you have attended Central St. Martin's Art College in London. Tell us a little bit about your experience and what that connection of tactility that you had and just overall, you know, that background.
So I'm going to look at my notes because of this whole brain fog perimenopausal thing. The struggle is real. So I started at St. Martin's around 1994. Yeah, some of you weren't even born. It was a 3-year degree course. I didn't do fashion. I did graphic design. And it was a very loose course where they gave us a lot of freedom to do whatever hell we want. And that's why St. Martin was such a good art college, because they gave you so much freedom to explore of what area you want. I couldn't really understand why I was there and what I wanted to do, because it took quite a while to try to find something you're good at. And when you're in like your early 20s or 18, like, it's actually quite hard to understand what you want, you know. And I always admire those people like you know, when you were young, you know exactly what your interests are. I had too many interests since I was young, you know. I like interior design, I like clothes, I like this. So it took me a while to find my way. The course was, I guess because of the caliber that, you know, it could bring, like all the lecturers, it opened a lot of doors for the students. And having said that, the teaching was so loose that you kind of are left to do, are left to be on your own. So for some students, some of us were quite lost. Not until I think towards the end of the second year or like the third year, the beginning of the third year, when I knew I had to, you know, knock out a whole portfolio, I started panicking and kind of like start going clubbing instead of like working, you know, because I was just trying to put it at the back of my mind. But I think I put my whole portfolio together in like the last 2-3 months only, and then I got a really good grade, which was. And then I realized that I actually work really well under pressure, and everything, all my ideas came really quickly. But through that kind of education, it gave me an idea of how to look at art and craft and design, and what I look for when I see something. It's mostly, the concept to me now is very important with every single project I get involved, or I used to get involved, or even if I look at, you know, all these lovely, amazing ceramic pieces. What is the idea? What is the story? And also what kind of message it conveys to the audience. And then I think every object, every project has a history, and research is so important to me. What kind of story it's telling? How do you change from a traditional way of thinking to mix it with a modernized way of thinking? And St. Martin's really encouraged people to experiment. I actually didn't, when I was there, it was the first generation of Mac, the bubble. I don't know if any of you remember the bubble. That was me. I didn't even touch my computer for like 3 years because I was so scared of it. So talking about doing things with hands, my whole portfolio was, everything was done by hand. Screen printing, photography, I would just meet, you know, if I see like a really cool, good-looking girl on the street in a tube, I'll go up to, hey, do you want to be a model? I want to photograph you. They just think I'm a freak, you know, just keep asking all these girls to be my model. And luckily, they wanted to collaborate, and then I did my whole portfolio based on photography, styling, and then third year, I met the owner of ID Magazine in London, and it's a street magazine, a street Bible magazine, and he came to give us a talk. And then I said, oh, I really want to have my own magazine. I was so naive. And he was like, oh, you look like you know how to dress really well. Do you want to become a stylist? I'm like, what is that? So then I started interning for him, and then the rest is history. So I think to have that kind of openness and creativity freedom is really important when you're starting young.
But like you, it sounds like throughout university you did really have that deep connection with just doing things with your hands. Like obviously computers were just kind of starting up, but it feels like you had that connection with the tactility of what you work, how you present, and I think you snagged like the winning spot at uni for actually being not doing what everyone else
Yes.
were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
You want it to be different, just like why would I use a computer? I can do all those really cool things with pure craft elements and still deliver an astounding result.
I mean, the fact that I'm not very good at computer, that, is another
It's
story.
kind of played to your benefit in that sense.
But I also realised that through this whole journey, there's no incorrect outcomes. There's only like, if you misinterpret a brief, then the result could be irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's what I understood from this whole journey that I've been on.
Yeah, thank you. Kartika, I'll jump into you for now. I'd love you to share what brought you to lighting as an arts medium in the first place.
Is this working?
You did?
So I studied interior architecture at uni. I think when we spoke about this before, I forgot this whole section of my life. So I started doing my thesis, which I don't know, I haven't even finished uni yet, but like one unit left that I'm just never going to complete, and I just hate uni. It's just not for me. So I started doing a thesis, and I based it upon my friend. So my friend, whenever he'd come over, he'd always wear like sunglasses or a hat. And I was always really intrigued by it. I just didn't really quite understand. Go to his house and like shine his lights in different directions. I was just like, what the hell is he doing? And then I started to understand when I'd go over, I'm like, this is beautiful. And I started replicating it in my own house. So I think that's what started that journey. And I based my whole thesis upon that, and then looked into, light and space. I studied the Mork House in Wembley, if anyone knows that. Yeah, so that's where I started with that. And then being like a more hands-on person, I looked into how I can create my own lighting and how like my own lighting can influence people in space, pretty much. So yeah.
So I do think that your work is a perfect example where the line is quite blurred, whether it's an art object or it's a design object. So do you consider yourself an artist or a designer?
At first I was very anti being an artist for some reason, I don't know why. I think I was quite afraid, but then I realised that maybe it gives you more opportunities. I think being a designer for me, in my head it meant that like I had to sit behind a desk or I had to work for other people. Becoming like an interior designer or like an architect or whatever, you just have to go to a firm pretty much. There's not really any opportunity to just work for yourself successfully as a young person. So then I was like, I might as well just like call myself an artist, because that's how you get into galleries pretty much. So it just kind of like shape-shifted my my perspective on that. But I do think my work is more design-based. That's how my brain thinks, and that's how my pieces work. Like if the one hole is 1 millimeter out, it's just not going to work, or you'll get electrocuted. Like it's very you'll die pretty much if you like the gas leaks out or something. Your house will explode. So there's more to it than just like it looking good and it giving you a certain feeling. Like you have to have certain knowledge. So.
I mean, we don't want your house to explode,
No.
so I feel like you're doing quite well in that kind of sense. And I mean, it's my personal opinion, but I really do believe that your work is this absolutely pure combination of art, craft, and design, because you make every single piece yourself. There's such a huge design element and functionality and intention in it, but there's also an artistic message of how you want people to feel. What do you put into your work? So congratulations on your show, by the way. It's absolutely incredible. But you can clap now, actually. That would be good. So going kind of in a bit more into this whole relationship between art, craft, and design, I want to talk to Jude. How do you perceive the relationship between the three?
Okay, so
That should be on. Flick it up, and we should be good.
Yeah?
You're
Okay.
on.
So, look, you've asked everybody personal questions
I
about
have.
their growth, and then you've ask me this question. So please forgive me, everybody, because I'm not perimenopausal. I'm just a really old person. I forget things. So I've written some things down, and I'm not going to try not to read it, but I'm just trying to retain the thought process.
Did you just take that one in case there's crack?
Okay, this is probably better. Yes. Okay. Look, I think it's really important to note at the outset that the distinction between art and craft is a Western construct. It doesn't exist in most parts of the world. This is something that the Western Hemisphere has decided we need to make these distinctions. So, and we're living in a space and time where definitions and prescriptions have become increasingly important to us. We like to box things. We really like to have some kind of order. The only thing that I can say with any certainty is that art is a slippery little sucker, and if you reckon you've got it nailed down, you're going to fall flat on your face, because nobody has the answer at any one time. They might have the answer in a speck of time, but art moves constantly. So I think Aristotle was the closest to anybody who'd come up with a definition that I understand and I can relate to. That art is not about the outward appearance, it's about the inward significance of what we see, what we experience, how the world is to us. It's an expression of truth. And the other critical part about art is that in a real concrete sense, it's absolutely useless. We cannot make bread with it, we cannot hold it, it won't make a perfect coffee. It's useless in a very, very specific way. So, but craft, on the other hand, comes from a deep tradition of usefulness. Woven baskets hold grain, beaten metal cooks food, wooden boxes hold dead bodies. Gold is used to, to express wealth, to be a trading system. And those things have all got a practical value, and they come from bucket loads of understanding materials, functionality, aesthetics, so problem solving and traditions. But craft is also the basis of art that moves us. The techniques and materials associated with craft have not only been the basis for domestic implements, they've formed some of the most exquisite objects in the world. So the rose windows of Chartres Cathedral are objects of craft. They operate because light comes into them, and yet what they do is they move us, they take us somewhere else, they take us to a place of spirituality, a place of where anything is possible. And in the similar way, churches, mosques, temples all around the world do exactly the same thing. They're infused with the works of skilled craftspeople. Taken individually, they could be seen as just purely decorative, but taken as a collected composite whole, they can also be seen as expressing the highest ideals of art. They express the inward meaning, and their usefulness lies in the perceptions of the viewers. As to design, and the design is a really important component of this whole thing, whether a fork is beautiful or not, it's a different question. The fork itself fulfills a function. It pierces food without bruising it. It fits nicely in our hand. It's pleasing to the eye. And those are all functions of design, obviously. But in relation to objects of function, whether it's clothing or kitchenware or objects of worship, craftspeople have always been designers. And I think that that's the thing about whether you are living in a small village with some reeds that you want to weave and to make into something that is purposeful and useful, you are designing that purpose as you make it. And you're asking yourself questions. Is this right? Oh, this is interesting. This might feel better, this might work better. So to answer your question in terms of art, craft and design, they're the tools that we use to define, to box and simplify our lives, and how much difference those terms make to our experience is a different question.
So
Do you think, and that's a question to all of you, I guess, can a utilitarian object be considered art?
Absolutely. And similar to what Jude spoke of, I was recently, and we all have, you know, these moments, because if you're here today, you care about those sort of things. But I was recently in Sicily. When you're in Italy, you are in art and design in a unique way, right? And, you know, I'll go to all the galleries and I'll go to all the museums and I'll swoon over the history of it all and the grandioseness of it all. But I was on an island in Sicily and I walked the same path every day for 5 days, and I'd seen all the art and I'd seen all the design, and I saw this beaded curtain hanging in the window of a shop, and it tripped me out in the craziest way, more than anything I'd seen. And I was like, whoa. I really went like that when I saw it, and I passed it on the first day and I was like, weirdo, it's just a beaded curtain, get over it. We've all, I mean, if you've lived through the mid-90s, you had a weird plastic one in your bedroom, right? So I was like, stop caring so much about this beaded curtain. And I passed it, and on the 5th day I was like, I'm going to have to find out about it. And I went, appeared in this historic building, and there's a bunch of really cool hairdressers behind the beaded curtain. And the, you know, the juxtaposition of that made me laugh, but again, it's what we're talking about today. It's about craft and modernity and history and culture and how we make things and how we made them hundreds of years ago. But the woman in the hairdresser spoke no English, I spoke no Italian, but she could see me tearing up over the beaded curtain. She thought I was a lunatic. But when you looked at it, I mean, so many beads, so intricately individually threaded, the colour composition like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was the highlight of a 4-week trip, this curtain. And I've since thought about that. When, you know, you posed this panel today, I was like, the beaded curtain. To me, it was like the clearest emotional response to history and culture, a culture that wasn't mine, but I could feel it in that thing. And when I finally got this hip young hairdresser to explain to me, he was like, you just go to, I don't know, you'll find them around, was all he could get out in English. And I spent the rest of the trip like, I've never found one. And I never will. And I found one plastic, you know, in the red dot equivalent. I found the plastic Italian version. But this is my long-walled answer to craft hits different.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else has a take on that?
Yeah, I think when we look at like practical objects, sometimes we don't consider it as like a design because it's mostly for function. But a friend of mine actually is a product designer, and he created this book lamp called Lumio, and I really urge you to go on his page and look at it, because he changed the dimension for me to how to look at a lamp, which is just functional, you know, just a little side table lamp. But this lamp opens up like a book, and that's why it's called a book lamp. And it comes in different sizes and shapes. And the way he designed is a practical object, but yet so beautifully done that it's almost like an art piece. So I think that the line is quite blurred when you're trying to talk about art, design, and craft, because nowadays you can combine all three and also make it a very useful and practical everyday object. And I think with those kind of designers, they always push boundaries to see how do you make something boring and turn it to gold. And that's what's so good about this book lamp. Definitely urge you to go onto Lumio IG and have a look.
Sounds amazing, yeah. We'll actually stay with you. I want to hear your thoughts about how art design and craft translate to fashion, especially when we talk about fusion of art and functionality.
I mean, the fashion industry is an industry that we always collaborate with artists. You know, I mean, LV collaborated with like Jeff Koons, and Versace, you know, have Andy Warhol's prints all over their collections. So it's nothing new, and it's a really good money-making process, right? Also a very commercial one, because fashion is a very commercial industry. I think, sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. Yeah, so in the past history, you know, designers always use for example, textile designers to collaborate, like digital prints on the material. There's a really cool brand called Unreal Age. They are the epitome of combining technology, new technology with fashion. So what happened with the last fashion show, the autumn winter collection, is they use like a photochromic material on all the models. So the models will come out to the stage, the catwalk, wearing like an outfit like this. And slowly, 2 UV light scan comes down from the stage and scan the whole outfit, and it turns into pattern, color pattern. And this color pattern will last only for 3 minutes, and it'll turn back to white. So this is a perfect example of technology, art, and craft combined together to produce like an amazing effect that no one probably ever thought about, that you can apply that on fashion, you know? And another brand called Caproni, for the spring summer show, you probably saw on the news even that Bella Hadid, the model, came out and they sprayed her whole body. She was basically half naked. She was wearing like a knickers. They sprayed her body with this fabric. It's like a sprayable liquid fabric, and they created, yes, and it was created by a scientist and a fashion designer. So they sprayed this kind of like latex kind of feel, elasticy material, and then just cut it out into like a dress. And you know, stuff like that is just, you can say it's a gimmick, but it created noise and it helped the brand to elevate to another level. So the fashion industry is definitely pushing even more technology, combining with everything that we normally use.
Yeah, I think you're wearing actually something quite interesting as well.
Yeah, so this is like an Easy Miyake design. So when I bought this, the salesperson, it was so lovely. I was in Tokyo and I bought it, and he took half an hour to tell me how to fold this, even up until today. So this folds back completely flat. It's great to go and travel. It's just like a piece of paper, it folds down, which that's my husband's job, because I have no idea how to do it still. So he's worked out how to do this, lay it flat. So it's like for designers like him, everything that he designed, is the material he uses and how it folds, it never creases. So when I go on holiday, I always pack something cool and fashionable. I'll definitely bring this, or always like creations that I have, because you don't have to iron anything, you know, when you go on holiday. So this is practicality as well. So when people always ask me, so how come brands like Comme des Garçons or, you know, Juno Watanabe or all these, you know, even Hussein Shalayan, how come sometimes they create outfits that no one can wear out, but it's still on a catwalk? I said, because you're selling a dream, you're selling a fantasy, and we all need some kind of entertainment, you know. But some of these pieces ended up in like the V&A museum because they are like art pieces. So even though it's not a ceramic piece or like a fine art painting, a lot of these creations are really worth being in a museum just to admire.
What about minimalistic pieces that are currently taking over, where you don't show the labels, you don't show the brands? They're very quiet, but the quality is incredible. The design is, you know, beyond. Like, can you consider those pieces art just because, you know, they're quiet, they're unassuming, they don't really scream from the rooftops, there's no huge statement about it. Do you think they're art?
Oh, 100%. Sometimes I kind of feel like being a minimalistic designer is actually harder to convey the message because it's so simple. Like, you know, designers like Hamlet Lang, you know, back in the day, or Calvin Klein or Jill Sander, which I've worked on many shows, you know, their ethos is, you know, minimalistic, you know, quiet luxury, that's what we call it now, is definitely harder to achieve because people don't quite understand why it exists, because they just think that it's really easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jude, actually, I think that's a really good transition here now, is, do you think that traditional craftsmanship techniques have their place in contemporary design or like modern fashion, just, you know, current contemporary space, I guess?
I've been so interested in this conversation, but to me, I think AI is the obvious direction for us all to be thinking about now. Do you need the skills of traditional craftsmanship to create a house or a fork? And probably not. if you can draw the thing on your computer and send it to a printer, then you've got your house thing. And you can ask AI to create a house for you with some parameters around, size, colour, materials, and then you presumably get your house fork. So AI can do all of this. They build on knowledge previously generated around balance, around how hands work, how you hold objects, how sharp a point needs to be, and what the most famous forks that have been made, you can design a new fork. Why? And that then negates the need for human beings to learn how to bend, cut, braze, create, and cure metal. And it can even replicate fingerprints and errors so that it looks as though it's been made by, a tireless worker in a lowly paid workshop with a mud floor, nobly making a fork for you. So I reckon, perhaps this is not your intention, but I do think AI is the critical thing for us. But the question for me is why, and we always answer it's because we can.
Yeah.
Because it's better, maybe, I don't know. But I do think that there's a real important, valuable contribution that AI can make to our lives. It's not necessarily making forks and getting rid of craftspeople. It's probably more around those big questions that we have that we fail to be able to answer, like how do we move people around without using too much fuel, and how can we move towards a greater understanding of each other without killing each other for not really very many good reasons. So I think we should ask AI to do that hard work rather than taking the role of craftspeople.
Yeah. I feel like Gab might have some things to say on that. Like, I know you very much believe in the power of collaboration and craft, and the way you enjoy your work at the moment is through that collaboration with people who put their heart and soul into things they create with their hands and the craft they've mastered for years. You want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, I am mad for collaboration, and I think it is, sounds hyperbolic, but like it's the greatest part of any work I do, is who I do it with. And I get teased by colleagues and friends, like my gang, they're called, because I've always got either some silly personal idea of something I want to make, or a client wants something, or at the moment I'm making a table for a client out of octopus traps and some recycled stone, and the client's like, but how will the octopus trap and the stone get together? I'm like, don't worry about it, I've got the gang. And there are 20 incredible local makers that I can think of who help me bring ideas to life. And the solution-driven minds and the play being so important, the playful way in which we get to problem solve is the bit that I love. So I'm fascinated and terrified about the AI conversations. As designers, we have them all the time, and absolutely I can see how my role in the building of a house will maybe not that in the not too distant future be redundant. But the collaboration and the sharing of knowledge and culture and historical practices, it's not, it can't go. It's what makes us human. So I hope that I understand it is just part of this forward rolling that we are on, this trip of life that, keeps moving and changing. I'm cool for it, but there will always be people who need to sit side by side and feel what it feels like to make, because that's what makes me tick.
Would anyone like to add to that subject, I guess, per se? Yes, Kritika?
I think for me, I think of it as like cooking. So like obviously we can all be given, you know, the same ingredients or the same utensils, but like at the end of the day, it's just all going to taste different. So, you know, you can program a computer to have those fingerprints and whatnot, but it's just never going to be the same. And as you were saying, you know, with sculptures and pottery, like it absorbs like your stress and your emotions. And I think that's the same with any form of like design work where you're hands-on. You can just feel people's past experiences and their ideas just through the way like even glue is applied. Like you can see their stress and how it's like either perfect or not. Yeah.
And that kind of takes me a bit, like we've been talking about mistakes a little bit and imperfections. Is that something we should embrace, or, you know, should we chase the perfect object? Should we chase, you know, the perfect piece of furniture that has no marks? Like, is that something we should embrace, the imperfection and mistakes, and like how does that translate into our everyday life, and how should we look at it?
I think it's quite unrealistic to think that anything is perfect, or even human beings are perfect, right? And I keep telling my son, you know, you're never going to find a perfect partner because they don't exist. You know, you're delusional if you think that, you know, it exists. And in terms of, you know, making mistakes when you, let's say, doing a ceramic piece, I actually really like it to look at something that is not perfect and have some flaws or have a crack. It's because that is part of the journey, right? And you will want to know from the artist what happened. So it's all about storytelling, I think, and also because I'm from Hong Kong, I'm Chinese, so my kind of perfection might be different from yours. Oh, so it depends. I think it depends on a lot of your upbringing and your cultural background. And sometimes I think with thriving for being perfect is a good goal to have, but at the same time it causes a lot of stress and anxiety and everything, and it could dent your growth journey.
Yeah.
So unless you know how to really manage it, your expectations, yes, aim for perfection in some ways when you're working, but at the same time, don't think of mistakes as a bad thing either, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
I think as well, I've just been to Yogyakarta and seen an extraordinary exhibition which by a ceramicist from Bandung, who's trained, he lives in Tokyo, but his work is really about perfection. It's about achieving perfection on a grand scale. And I understand that desire, that impulse, you know, for him. He's completely OCD, which he confesses to. But I understand that impulse and that desire, and it's admirable and it's exciting and it's extraordinary to see. But I think because we're humans, we like the other thing as well. We like both ends of this, and because we're humans and there's such variety within us, there will always be the people who wish for perfection, want it, revere it, and those who want to see the wobbly bits.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone from the audience had a take on imperfections and mistakes, and like, is that something you cherish? I guess the ceramicist in the audience as well is I see Annika right there. Sorry, I'm putting you right on the spot, but forgot I have a mic. Ceramics and cracks, whether they're cosmetic or they're actually cracking a functional piece, should we cherish the pieces that are imperfect? Like, so we're sitting in the room, like each and one of those pieces sometimes would have taken 6 to 8 weeks to create, and all the way till the end you don't actually know if it's going to be exactly how you wanted it, if it's going to be perfect, maybe there's a cosmetic crack, anything and everything can happen. But I know you have a very close relationship with embracing the imperfection.
Yeah.
I want to hear a few words
Yes.
from you.
For an example, like our art piece, thank you. Our art piece shown here, we created 2, and then after the second firing, we found a large crack in the wall piece, and because it was something that we had never attempted before in terms of technicality, so, but it turned out to be like we didn't have time to make another one, or we weren't happy with putting something else that we had out there that was not, it was not made for the other piece. So this was made for this exhibition, and so we just decided to embrace the crack, and we conceived it basically.
It's a beautiful result. Yeah.
So we just embraced it and thought, well, hey, that adds to the concept of the piece anyway, because that was the idea to begin with.
Yeah. I'll put people on the spot now, actually, straight after you. What's your take on perfection, on mistakes? Like, you have such an incredible design background. Should we strive for perfect in architecture? Should we strive for a perfect house? Should we strive for a perfect piece of furniture? Should we embrace the mistakes, perhaps by the architects?
Well, what's that?
Yeah.
Are you saying to me?
Sorry, people right there.
Look,
I think there are certain architects and certain craftspeople and certain artists who are driven to perfection. That is what drives them. That's what they want. And then there's also the process, where people are prepared to go with what comes up. So, for example, an architect, we visited a fantastic house, and I thought that architect was very, very particular about everything, but then he found a whole lot of bricks that were sitting in some place that they could use, and it completely changed the way that the house was built. So I think just being open to serendipity and being open to what the process kind of leads to. That's not maybe so much about perfection and imperfection, but just about I think we can all be moved by something that is perfect.
Yeah.
And I think we can also feel emotional, because for me it's all about how we feel. That's our response to something and how it makes us feel. So I think we can get satisfaction out of both.
Do you think you can get more feeling out of something that's not perfect?
No,
It makes you think
I think
about it?
sometimes I think see things that are perfect and they're incredibly moving.
Yeah.
Because, they're just...
They're perfect for you.
Well, and also,
In some way.
the thing I think also, which is slightly off topic, just, craft, when I see something that is incredibly beautifully made, where you can see that someone has spent so much time and so much, so much talent goes into it, I think that can be really compelling and moving.
Yeah.
So, look, I think we can be open to everything.
Thank you for sharing. And for, actually saying a few words, me putting you right on the spot, I appreciate it. I do have one last it's somewhat off topic, but it's something I've been thinking about recently. It's emerging versus established, and I do have a question for you. You do consider yourself as an emerging artist. At what point does one become established? What's the metric? Who sets it? Who decides it?
I think everyone else decides it besides yourself. That's how it feels. There's that, where you apply for things, there's that 10-year point where they're like, oh, now you're established apparently. But yeah, it wasn't really clear to me thinking about it beforehand, because I haven't really thought about it. I haven't really had to deal with it, but then when they were introducing all you three, I was like, okay, I'm definitely emerging. I've got like 2-3 years experience. Obviously I've been doing stuff since I was little, but yeah, it's a really hard one. I think once you maybe, I don't know.
Jude, I would love to hear your take on it. And sorry, I didn't actually ask much about your background in the beginning because I just see you're like this incredible wealth of knowledge. I was like, I don't think she needs a huge introduction of how you started. I just want to know what you know and what you think about all those amazing subjects we're covering. What's your take on emerging versus established? Like,
it used to be around age, and then it became apparent that couldn't possibly work because in Australia we started having Indigenous people who were 60 years old who started painting. So it's not about age, quite clearly. I don't. Again, it's one of those constructs that's probably being designed by funding bodies, really, and for their own arcane reasons, and not really of much value to anybody else. We all see ourselves as being well, I do anyway, slightly incompetent in many areas. So I don't know about the value of it. It's just one of those things. I'm sorry, I don't really have the words.
There is no answer, I guess, but it's just something that who decides.
And I think on that, sorry, I've got a noisy one, I probably don't need it. It probably circles back to what we're here to talk about today, and I think you can look at the four of us and you and other, talented people in this room. All the lines are blurred. I mean, look at the breadth of experience we have here and the paths we took to get here. Plenty of sidestepping, plenty of blurry lines, plenty of ideas of like, oh, well, I was this, and then I was this. And then art, craft and design need no boundaries on any of them. They're not just cousins, they're closer than that. There's no need for the definitions. And I feel really strongly about that because the power of my career has been in its sidestepping. And everything I do has the most beautiful blend of art, craft and design. We're at this exhibition because we care about those three things. So the emerging established feels the same for me. I just think we're fortunate to be in a time where none of it really matters. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Also, I think you don't have to stick to your lane, right? I think nowadays we all need to have 2 or 3 careers apparently, so
10.
yes, right, in order to survive. And also, I'm interested in doing movies and directing and all that and stuff. So why can't I do that? Because I'm come from fashion, I have a different eye, So I think nowadays we don't have to stay in our lane. That's the thing. That's the main thing.
I guess.
I think it's probably time. I have no idea what time it is, by the way.
10 past 12.
Oh, that's pretty good. Questions from the audience. Don't be shy. To be frankly honest, I'll just drop the microphone. I want to encourage a bit of a banter. Like, there is no right answer, there is no wrong answer. We have so many incredible opinions around the room. Ask the questions, let's talk about it, and then when you're fed up asking questions and answering, we'll just all go, well, you go home, I stay here. But, anyone?
Yeah. We sort of tend to generally think of craft design in terms of physical objects, and can that same idea of craft and craftspeople be taken into the digital realm, into spaces that are not tangible?
Absolutely.
Who's that to, husband?
Anyone who wants to answer.
I'm not answering. I talk to him all the time.
You don't talk to us.
Bored with him.
I think the answer is absolutely. And I'm just, there are so many examples, I guess, of craftspeople who move. As Grace is saying, nobody's got to stay in their own lane anymore. We really don't. We can do whatever we want, when we want, as long as we can make it work. But having said that, I'd like to ask Julia a question, because this is a really extraordinary thing to take on. You're not with an organisation, you're not with a gallery, you're not with an institution. You've just decided that this is something you want to do.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us about why?
Good question.
One of those, why not? I've been asking myself the question why for pretty much the last 8 months, going, why am I doing this? It is a self-run project. It runs on love, passion, tears, and I guess thanks to my husband paying my rent right now, that's basically the reality of it. I don't know. I don't have the right answer just to go, this is exactly what I'm doing. But then the other week, one of the artists said, thank you, and I almost cried. And I was like, maybe that's why I'm doing it. And sometimes I don't hear when people say thank you to me. I'm like, what are you thanking me for? Like, I haven't really done anything. But knowing that I am creating a platform for people to showcase their work that they're proud of, that they've been working on for weeks, that's their medium of expression, that's their livelihood, and anything and everything in between, it just makes me happy, and I don't really know why. It's, yeah, who knows why, but one of the reasons is just, I want others to be happy, I guess. Is that a good enough reason? I don't know. But also I think that ceramics are very much underappreciated. It's, we know, is ceramics an art form? Quite a lot of people I would talk to, it's like, what do you work on? Like, yeah, ceramics. Like, oh, pottery. I'm like, well, yes, to some degree, ceramic art and pottery, there's like, they're two intertwined. Are you a potter or are you ceramic artists? To me, a potter, you start with pottery and then you may evolve into ceramic artist. And I think that people that I have around here, all the 17 artists we have around, they are potters, they can be potters, but they have emerged of being ceramic artists. And I want to celebrate ceramics as an art form. That's basically it, I guess.
Thanks.
But thank you for the question.
Are you a maker, Julia, as well?
No, not a maker. I don't have the patience for it. I went to a class once. I felt very anxious about achieving perfection, just going back into perfection. It's like clay does not do what you want it to do just because you asked it. It's completely unpredictable, and I take my hat off to every single artist. I walked out of that class and I messaged Em Lindegard, and I'm like, I don't know how you do this. I generally don't, but no, I mean, my arts medium, I guess, is floristry, so I do botanical design. That's kind of how this thing accidentally happened. Maybe one day, when I calm down a little bit. I feel like my husband could be a good potter. He's a patient person in our family.
But not the dexterity.
Not the dexterity. Well, you can't have it all either, I guess, but yeah.
This has really resonated, and congratulations, it's absolutely beautiful and such an inspiring talk from you all. And I just wanted to make a comment, which for me, ceramics and clay is a remarkable medium, and this idea of perfection and when to stop. And I think one thing that I take from it is risk-taking. And that is an area that, my friend here sitting next to me is a real risk taker, and I'm in constant admiration of being able to let go and being able to, really let the hands take you and the concepts develop, and having those narratives running through things is very rich and rewarding.
Yeah. I think that's also one of the reasons why this show happened is I want to push ceramic artists to explore. I want them to make mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes, you don't grow. Growing is hard. You don't want to do it. You actually things that are like, I have a feeling each and one of you would resonate. If you want to take something new just because you want to do it, whatever your motives are, actually doing it is incredibly challenging, and it hurts, and you don't want to do it, and things don't work. And like that's what I'm looking at, even because she's right here, and I know like her and Serena, they work hand in hand, but it's a year of perfecting that craft that make it look so easy. But it's like taking one step at a time, and just kind of going back to the ceramics, I guess, is majority of the artists here, they've never made a wall piece before. So that was a part of the brief, I guess. You need to create an object, and most of the artists have done that before, and then you need to extend your craft into the wall piece. And that piece essentially needs to be your artistic expression of ceramic craft, etc. I think they've done an absolutely incredible job, but it was quite a journey for some people. Number of emerging artists never even, completed a set before that would kind of have a relationship with them, or ceramic artists that have been in the industry for 50 years never made a wall piece. Like Charmaine Ball right behind us, she's a prime example, an incredibly talented artist, never made a wall piece. I'm like, why not? And here we are, like absolutely incredible result, and that kind of actually takes me to asking questions. I found that more established artists ask more questions. they always ask really good questions as well. It's something I haven't thought about. So yeah, I want people to ask questions, I want people to feel challenged, I want people to hurt a little bit, so it's much better after and just grow. But in that kind of sense,
Pushing the comfort zone.
yeah, I think it's quite important for artists. If you stay within your comfort zone all the time, yeah, why not? But I mean, that's also just me. I never stop. But anyway.
But also how to look at normal object and push it to another level, right? And I remember when I did my St. Martin's degree, I had 2 months left and I had nothing in my portfolio, and then I went to my local tube station and there was a photo booth there, and I had to renew my passport, so I was like taking passport pictures like this, and I was like, what if I did my whole fashion shoot in this place, which is about the size of this, right? So I think for the rest of the month, I took all my clothes and I set up my working space there, and I became very friendly with the tube manager. Bring me coffee, and I would be chit-chatting, eating English biscuits and all that and stuff. And I basically just saw this object and I thought, I think I can do something really fun with this, So I basically decorated the whole inside of the photo booth and then created this kind of like catalogue thing, a fashion book thing, just strips of passport pictures. I don't know where it is now, I wish I kept it, but it was so much fun and so inspiring just to push myself, just to see where, because I had no control over the photography side, because it was just a passport booth. But sometimes I think those kind of accident happens for a reason. When you think you can't do something and you really challenge yourself, once you've done it, you're like, God, shit, So yeah, so it was a really good experience.
And there's something about that too, isn't there? You're in a studio, which is a controlled environment, but then you put yourself out into that environment. You've got to interact with a whole lot of other people. They've got to see you coming and going.
Oh yeah,
in there.
they thought I was mad.
So that's affecting everything, that sort of step back of bravery.
Because every time anyone comes into the photo booth to take pictures, I have to get out. I have to take out all my, papers or whatever, I was sticking on it. And they were like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, it's my degree portfolio. They're like, oh. So they're like, oh, it's kind of interesting. And so they start wanting to know, all these people are in suits, they go to the city for work. So it kind of struck another conversation that it helped them to look at things differently, it helped them to look at the photo booth differently. So
But it means that you're interacting with all of those people in a different way that you wouldn't have.
Yeah, I asked one of the guys, I was like, can you just stick your foot in while I take a picture? He's like, sure.
And there's an extension in that what you created at the tube station is a form of public art, right? And I work in that space, which, part of my job, very rarely does a public artwork exist already, right? So it's always a commissioning process, and then you're asking somebody, just like you did for their ceramic artist, to make a wall piece. In public art, we're approaching somebody often with just a studio or a gallery practice who has never considered leaving those four walls. And we're pleading, because we think we can see something, for them to leave the studio and come out into a construction landscape where they have to consider thousands of people walking past their artwork. They have to consider safety, accessibility, weather, how we're making this thing. These artists haven't worked with a fabricator before, they work in a studio. All of a sudden this collaboration thing comes up, and we're working with traffic wardens, architects, landscape designers, a fabricator. And what a thrill. And some artists don't want to be invited into that realm, and that's cool. They want to stay doing what they're doing because they're doing it beautifully well. But how rewarding when an artist says, I could take this really small 2D drawing and I could put it in a public space, which is what your project did. And there's a real risk-taking, a real courage in that, and so much learning that comes from the challenge.
I find public art fascinating. That's something I'm currently learning quite a bit about. Because there is such an incredible component. It is art. It's literally called public art. But the design element that needs to go into it is incredible. One would not exist without another.
Could we ask somebody who's a craftsperson who is currently making a public artwork what that experience is like?
Sure.
This is Melissa Cameron, who's making the work for the new Murdoch Health and Knowledge Precinct.
Yeah, I'm a jeweller, but I come from an interior architecture background, so everything that everyone has said this morning has resonated with me. And I'm... Can you get a microphone? So my jewellery practice started before my architecture practice, but I worked as an interior architect for about 5 years in Perth, and then I did more training at university in Melbourne to become a jeweller, because the craft aspect is very all-consuming when you make something like jewellery. It has to function, it has to be beautiful, and it obviously incorporates a design aspect. There are some jewellers who just sit at the bench and come up with things out of more of a craftsmanship and a knowledge of materials, but given that I had an AutoCAD background, I always launched in drawing first and then object afterwards. I just had the benefit of getting to make the object, which is the bloody hand side of things, which I deeply resonate with. Part of my practice really is a meditation, and I kind of have the privilege of being able to do the drawing and then execute the work. So when it came to scaling up, I was quite used to doing the drawing. Letting go of the work and the execution was more familiar to me from my interiors practice. But in the way that things have evolved, I have literally just spent the last 2 days in a factory in Osborne Park, putting the pieces together onto these, 2.5 metre tall panels, 1,100 wide, pre-drilled holes, and myself and the manufacturer, who also happens to be my sister, who's a cabinet maker, we just literally were getting colours together and then putting them through the holes, making sure that everything was in the right order and making sure that all the joints were secure, making sure each of the enamel pieces, which for the first time in my career I actually outsourced the enamel side of the work, because normally I work in tiny little pieces and I can fire like 100 at a time, whereas these ones, I could maybe fit 2 of them in my kiln, so I used an industrial enamelist in Victoria. And I suppose that part, letting go of that, has been somewhat of a challenge, but at the same time, not completely unfamiliar. And I've spoken with a few people about this recently, who are architects or interior architects, that they often get into something like ceramics or jewellery making just to bring the method of production back closer to themselves, because it gets very unwieldy and big, and they don't get the satisfaction of being able to make something. And it's kind of uncommon for me now, but I can walk into my studio and make a pair of earrings in an afternoon and walk out with a new pair of earrings to wear. And there's so many, there's the hand skills meditation, there's the flow state of designing and manufacturing something, there's the requirement that the object have, gravity and is able to fulfill certain things like Jude was talking about before, like it's got to be able to drape or hang well, it's got to be able to robust material, it's got to fulfill requirements, but it's also, as a jewellery work, it's an adornment. So I have also an understanding that, the adornment has to adorn, it's got to function as a beautiful object as well. So it's interesting to go large, but I don't think it's going to be all of my practice, because there's still that enjoyment of creation. And I think earlier everyone was sort of, Jude beautifully put the division between art and craft as being kind of an irrelevance, and that's something that I have come to really understand throughout my practice, that my brain is being used in much the same way, no matter what it is that I'm doing. It's the aesthetic eye that I have that's making the final choices, and it doesn't matter if it's in an art context or a craft context or a design context. It's the same brain that's doing the same work. So I think that's the thing that can carry me across things, and as soon as you can kind of see yourself in different rooms doing different things at different scale, then I think you're kind of free to create to whatever level that you want to. It's the barriers that are put up are artificial, but you have to be able to really acknowledge that inside of yourself before you can kind of push through all of them and move on.
Beautiful report. Thank you so much for sharing.
Right. Unless anyone else has questions or...
I have questions.
Yeah. Hopefully we have answers.
Hopefully. I would also like to take a moment to thank Julia, because when you were talking about, why you're doing it for, well, people like me who are looking for representations of contemporary ceramics that are engaging and challenging and providing inspiration, because to help engage me and encourage me and show me that there's a space opening to push myself to reach for that. So thank you. And then it's been wonderful to hear the range of that all of you have been able to offer today. Thank you to all of you as well. There was a couple of things I had questions about, and I guess we won't probably get to all of them. But the idea of, particularly I suppose in relationship to AI and the way that it's starting to evolve, and I hadn't even thought about the concept, the idea that potentially it could be looking to engage those difficult social questions about ways of, for example, like how to move people, or maybe there's ways that it's taken us a long time and we can't agree on a lot of things, so maybe there's an opportunity there that I hadn't thought about that, because to me it's like, oh, it's scary, like they're going to come and take opportunities, and I think there's a potentially insidious side that can be frightening, but also we have sometimes a knee-jerk response to not to be afraid of what we don't understand. So there's chances for us to engage, which I think was great to hear as a new perspective. But I do wonder about then what it is that the artist and the craftsman and the designer, and as you've said, is in many ways the same role. What is it that their contribution can offer that the position of like the role of the artist and the mark of the maker and that internal struggle or internal development of what they've put into themselves? How do we, I feel like because of the way that ceramics is starting to kind of come back a bit, there's kind of been this new cycle and it's been opening up as a space. Is that maybe an indication that there is this other appreciation for that imperfection and that willingness to be vulnerable? And like, how can we encourage that, or how can we keep an emphasis, like Julia has done, to encourage and engage artists to push themselves in this space here? Was there a question in that? I'm sorry. But I think because you've all got such, it's been great to hear all of you and the very interdisciplinary nature of your work, and it's also been inspiring because a lot of people, also myself, have had very meandering spaces to get to where they are. But how do you see, I guess, that interplay between the balance of spaces for AI, but primarily what is the role of the maker or the artist, and what is it that they can contribute?
I think for me, it always comes back to humanity. We're all human, we've all got something to offer, we can all make and give in a different way. And all of that's really, really important to society, to relationships, to structures, to how we are, how we can be in the world. So, for me, it's always been really simple. There is undoubtedly a place for every kind of aspect of creation. Some of those parts of creation are pretty horrible, and some of them are wonderful and extraordinary. And I think that the role that Julia has taken for herself and the role that other people, artists and curators and groups take for collaborating, opening spaces for collaboration, opening spaces for whatever our imaginations can do, is they're the things that will not save us, that's a bit of a big ask.
Prevail.
But continue to remind us of our humanity, the best parts of that, if that's not too emotional.
It's beautiful.
And makers will make. They make because they have to. Right? It's really part of living. And so there are very few things that will stop someone driven to make from making. And I think that's promising.
I think in terms of AI, we all have a responsibility as human beings to use it responsibly. And I wish that everyone would have the same, way of thinking. But I think I saw it, was it yesterday or the day before, there was a Japanese brand that used an AI model. So who's to say that maybe the modeling industry is going to be in a dire situation as well? They will stop using real models, which I doubt they will, because as we all know, we need human interaction, and that's why we're all here, right? We could be sitting at home and looking at our phone today, but we're not. We're still here. There's always going to be people that are pro-technology, and there are always going to be some of us, like me, that I'll use it, but it's not my whole life.
I actually have the thing, I'll grab the mic right now. Oh, that's alright.
The 3D printing is actually something I've been looking at when it comes to ceramics, and I think, 3D printing fascinates me no matter what you look at. I think it can be an arts medium on its own. And there is 3D printing for ceramics and how it's kind of done. But in order to get from point A to point B, there is still a huge human element in that. You still need to imagine it, you still need to design. Of course you can ask AI to do it for you and then you program it, but it's just not the same. I want to know a human thought of it. I want to know a human kind of went, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to make. Might be rubbish, might be good, I'll give it a go. Humanity is important, human touch is important, physicality is incredibly important. And Anfisa is all about celebrating the human behind the art. That's kind of why we're here. And I keep getting a question of how did you get into the arts and why are you, within the arts sector? I don't even have backgrounds in the arts at all. I met people who were creating and I fell in love with them, and that's how it all became. It was do I really care about art? Probably not. No, not really. I love the end product.